The town of Millbrook was a postcard come to life, cradled between emerald hills and a lazy, winding river. Its main street glowed with the charm of old brick storefronts and hanging flower baskets, while white picket fences framed homes that whispered of simpler times. In Millbrook, secrets were currency. Everyone knew something about someone, and the air was thick with unspoken truths. It was the kind of place where a smile hid a story and a whisper could unravel a life. At the heart of this quiet chaos was Emily Carter, a 32-year-old third-grade teacher whose warmth lit up the local elementary school. With her auburn hair pulled into a messy bun and a knack for coaxing shy kids out of their shells, Emily was a fixture in Millbrook, a steady presence parents adored and students idolized. Her life looked like a dream, a cozy house with a wraparound porch, a 5-year-old daughter named Sophie who loved drawing stars, and a husband, Mark, who owned the town's hardware store. They were the Carters' Millbrook's golden family. But lately, cracks had begun to show. Mark had been slipping away, his evenings stretching late with excuses about inventory or tricky accounts. Emily felt it in the silences that lingered between them, in the way his eyes dodged hers over dinner. She told herself it was nothing. Marriages ebbed and flowed, didn't they? But the doubt gnawed at her, sharp and persistent, like a pebble in her shoe. One humid Tuesday evening, Emily stood at the stove, stirring a pot of spaghetti sauce that filled the kitchen with the tang of tomatoes and basil. The screen door creaked open, and Mark shuffled in, his shoulders slumped, his dark hair mussed. He tossed his keys onto the counter with a metallic clink. "Hey," Emily said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Dinner's almost ready. Sophie's setting the table." Mark mumbled something indistinct, his gaze fixed on the floor as he trudged upstairs. Emily's chest tightened. This wasn't the man who used to scoop Sophie into his arms or sneak a kiss while she cooked. He was a shadow now, a stranger wearing her husband's face. Hours later, the house was still. Sophie slept under a constellation of glow-in-the-dark stars, and Mark lay beside Emily, his breathing slow and even. She stared at the ceiling, the hum of crickets outside doing little to calm her racing mind. Her eyes drifted to Mark's phone on the nightstand, its screen a faint glow in the dark. She wasn't a snoop, she'd always trusted him, but tonight, the pull was too strong. Her hand shook as she picked it up. No passcode. Her thumb hesitated over the messages, then tapped. She scrolled past mundane text suppliers, a buddy, asking about fishing until she saw it. A message from Lisa, her sister. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Love you." The words seared into her brain. Emily's breath hitched, and she pressed a hand to her mouth to choke back a sob. Lisa, the sister who'd braided her hair as kids, who'd cried with her at their dad's funeral. And Mark. The room spun, the walls closing in as betrayal sank its claws into her heart. She didn't sleep. Her mind churned with memories, Lisa laughing at their kitchen table, Mark fixing her car last summer. Had she missed something? A glance? A touch? By morning, exhaustion had hardened into resolve. She needed answers. After dropping Sophie at school, Emily drove to Lisa's bungalow, its wildflower garden a riot of color against the gray of her mood. Lisa answered the door in a sundress, her blonde curls bouncing, her smile bright, until she saw Emily's face. "Em? What's wrong?" Lisa's voice was soft, tinged with worry. Emily stepped inside, her fists balled at her sides. "I saw the text, Lisa, the one you sent to Mark." Lisa blinked, her smile vanishing. "What text?" "Don't lie to me." Emily's voice trembled, anger and pain colliding. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Love you. What's going on?" Lisa's face drained of color. She stepped back, hands fluttering. "Emily, it's not what you think. I can explain." "Then do it," Emily snapped, her eyes blazing. Lisa swallowed hard. "Mark and we've been planning a surprise for your birthday. A party, that's all." Emily stared at her, searching for cracks in the story. "A party? That's why you said love you." Didn't mean it like that," Lisa stammered, her gaze dropping. "It was a slip. I was just excited." "Excited?" Emily echoed, her voice rising. "With my husband? You expect me to believe that?" "Emily, please, you're blowing this out of proportion. There's nothing between us." But Emily saw it, the flicker of guilt in Lisa's eyes, the nervous twist of her fingers. She turned on her heel and stormed out, the door banging shut behind her. A party. It was a flimsy lie, and she wasn't buying it. That night, Emily lied to Mark, saying she was meeting a friend. Instead, she parked near the hardware store, the engine idling as she watched him lock up. When he pulled out in his truck, she followed, her pulse hammering in her ears. The streets of Millbrook blurred past quiet houses, flickering streetlights, until Mark turned onto a road leading out of town. He stopped at the Bluebird Inn, a weathered motel with peeling paint and a neon sign that buzzed faintly. Emily parked across the street, her breath shallow as Mark knocked on a door. Moments later, Lisa appeared, glancing around before letting him in. Emily's heart shattered. She gripped the steering wheel, tears spilling down her cheeks. The truth was undeniable now, a wound that bled with every second she sat there. Time stretched into eternity until the motel door swung open again. Mark and Lisa emerged, their voices sharp in the night air. Mark waved his arms, furious, while Lisa wiped at her face, sobbing. Then Mark stormed to his truck and peeled out, gravel spraying. Emily hesitated, then followed. She had to confront him, had to hear him admit it. The road twisted through dark fields, Mark's taillights a beacon ahead. But his driving grew wild, the truck swerving across the lane. Emily's stomach dropped. He was too fast, too reckless. Then it happened. His truck veered sharply, tires squealing, and slammed into a massive oak tree. The crash was deafening, metal crumpling, glass shattering. Emily braked hard, her car skidding to a stop as she leapt out, legs shaking. "Mark! Mark!" she screamed, sprinting to the wreck. Steam hissed from the hood, the air thick with the stench of gasoline. She reached the driver's side, peering through the broken window. Mark slumped over the wheel, blood streaking his forehead. "Mark, please!" she sobbed, fumbling for his wrist. A faint pulse thrummed beneath her finger. She was alive. Barely. Sirens wailed in the distance, cutting through the night. Emily clung to his hand, her mind a storm of questions. How had they fallen so far? What came next? Could she ever heal from this? But as the red and blue lights flashed closer, one thought drowned out the rest. This was only the beginning. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and despair, a sterile haze that clung to Emily as she sat beside Mark's bed. His chest rose and fell beneath a tangle of tubes and wires. The beep of the heart monitor a cruel metronome to her thoughts. A concussion, broken ribs, a fractured arm. He'd live, the doctors said, but he hadn't woken up yet. Emily's eyes traced the bandages on his forehead, the dried blood crusting at his temple. She should have felt relief. Instead, she felt hollow. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. It had been buzzing all morning, Lisa, no doubt, pleading her case. Emily wasn't ready to hear it. Not after seeing them together at the motel, not after the lie about a birthday party crumbled under the weight of their guilt. A nurse poked her head in, her voice gentle. "Mrs. Carter, there's someone here to see you." Emily frowned. "Who?" Before the nurse could answer, a man stepped into the room. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a leather jacket that creaked as he moved, and a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. His dark eyes locked onto hers, sharp and unreadable. "Emily Carter?" His voice was gravelly, like he'd smoked too many cigarettes. She stood, her stomach twisting. "Who are you?" "Name's Viper," he said, crossing his arms. "We need to talk about your husband." Emily's mouth went dry. "What about him?" Viper glanced at Mark's unconscious form, then back at her. "He owes me money, a lot of it, and I don't care if he's half dead. I want it back." "Money?" Emily's voice cracked. "What are you talking about? He runs a hardware store." Viper smirked. A cold, humorless thing. "Sure he does. And I'm guessing he didn't tell you about the side hustle. Gambling. Bad bets. Big debts. 50 grand, to be exact. Due last week." Her knees buckled, and she gripped the chair for support. $50,000? They didn't have that kind of money. The house was mortgaged, their savings scraped thin. "You've got the wrong guy," she said weakly. "Mark wouldn't." "He would. And he did." Viper pulled a folded paper from his jacket and tossed it onto the bed. It landed near Mark's limp, hand-a-grainy photo of him at a poker table, sweat beading on his brow, stacks of chips in front of him. "That's from last month. He thought he could play his way out. He was wrong." Emily stared at the photo, her world tilting again. First Lisa, now this. How many secrets had Mark buried? She forced her voice steady. "I don't have $50,000. "Then you'd better find it," Viper said, stepping closer. "Or things get messy. For you. For your little girl." A chill shot through her. "Leave my daughter out of this. Then don't make me bring her into it." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "You've got the—" The room fell silent, save for the heart monitor's relentless beep. Emily sank into the chair, her mind racing. She couldn't go to the Polisonot with a man like Viper lurking. She couldn't trust Lisa, not yet. And Mark unconscious, useless held the answers she couldn't reach. Hours later, she returned home, the weight of Viper's threat crushing her. Sophie was at a friend's house, thank God, leaving the place eerily quiet. Emily paced the living room, then stopped at Mark's desk. If he'd hidden a gambling debt, what else was he hiding? She yanked open drawers, rifling through receipts and junk until she found it a small locked box tucked beneath a stack of invoices. Her hands trembled as she grabbed a letter opener and pried it open. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with Mark's tight scrawl. Dates, numbers, names, thousands of dollars in and out, far more than the hardware store could account for. Her eyes snagged on one entry. Lisa, $10,000, repaid. Lisa. Her sister's name stared back at her, a fresh stab of betrayal. Had she been in on this too, funding his lies? But then, at the bottom of the last page, something else caught her eye, a single line in red ink, circled twice. Vault 17, $75,000, the 18th of March, 2 days from now. A vault, $75,000, enough to pay Viper and more. But where and why? The doorbell rang, jolting her from her thoughts. She shoved the ledger back into the box and crept to the window. Through the blinds, she saw a police cruiser in the driveway, 2 officers standing on her porch. Her pulse spiked. Had Viper sent them, or was this about Mark? She opened the door, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "Can I help you?" "Mrs. Carter?" The older officer, a woman with grey-streaked hair, held up a badge. "We're here about your husband's accident. There's something you need to know." Emily's throat tightened. "What?" The officer's eyes were steady, almost pitying. "We found evidence in his truck. He wasn't just driving recklessly. Someone tampered with the brakes." The police officers stood on Emily's porch, their silhouettes stark against the fading dusk. The older one, Officer Reynolds, her badge reed-shifted her weight, her expression unreadable. The younger officer, a wiry man with a nervous tick in his jaw, clutched a notepad like it was a lifeline. "Tampered with the brakes," Emily repeated, her voice a brittle thread. "You're saying someone tried to kill him?" Reynolds nodded. "The brake lines were cut. Clean job, not an accident. We're treating it as attempted murder." Emily's knees weakened, and she gripped the doorframe. Murder, the word echoed in her skull, colliding with Viper's threats, the ledger, and Lisa's lies. Who would do that? "That's what we're trying to figure out," Reynolds said. "Did your husband have enemies? Anyone who'd want him hurt?" She almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound she swallowed back. Enemies? She didn't even know who her husband was anymore. I don't know. He's been distant, but I didn't think." "We'll need to speak with him when he wakes up," the younger officer cut in, flipping his notepad shut. "And we'd like you to come to the station tomorrow. See if you can think of anything, names, arguments, anything unusual." Emily nodded numbly, watching them retreat to their cruiser. As the taillights vanished down the street, she closed the door and leaned against it, her breath ragged. Attempted murder. 50 grand in debt. A vault with 75,000. Her life was a house of cards, and someone had just kicked the table. She pulled the ledger from the box again, flipping to that circled entry. Vault 17, $75,000, the 18th of March, tomorrow. Whatever it meant, it was her only shot at paying Viper and keeping Sophie safe. But a vault needed a key or a code, and she had neither. The house creaked as she climbed the stairs to their bedroom, her mind churning. Mark's side of the closet was a mess of flannel shirts and work boots, but she dug deeper, tossing aside old jackets until her fingers brushed something cold and metallic. A small safe, hidden behind a shoebox. No combination, lock, just a keyhole. Her heart raced as she ransacked his nightstand, then his dresser. Nothing. She was about to give up when she spotted his wallet on the bed, flung there after the hospital. She dumped its contents cards, receipts, a crumpled 5, and there, tucked into a slit behind his driver's license, was a thin brass key. It fit the safe perfectly. Inside was a single item, a folded note. She unfolded it with shaking hands, revealing a handwritten address 117 River Road and a number, 17, Vault 17. Below it, in Mark's scrawl, "Tell no one." River Road was on the edge of Millbrook, a stretch of crumbling warehouses and abandoned lots by the water. A bank? A storage unit? She didn't know, but she'd find out tomorrow. The next morning, Sophie's friend's mum agreed to watch her again, leaving Emily free to act. She hadn't told Lisa about Viper, or the ledger her sister's name in it was a splinter she couldn't pull out yet. Instead, she drove alone, the key burning a hole in her pocket. 117 River Road was a squat, grey building with rusted shutters and a faded sign. Millbrook Self-Storage. The lot was empty, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and river muck. Inside, a bored clerk barely glanced up from his phone. "Vault 17, Emily said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need access," he grunted, sliding a clipboard across the counter. "Sign here, it's in the back." Her boots echoed on the concrete as she navigated rows of lockers, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Vault 17 was larger than the rest. Its steel door scratched but solid. She inserted the key, turned it, and the lock clicked open. Inside was a duffel bag, heavy and black. She unzipped it, and her breath caught stacks of cash, bundled with rubber bands. She didn't need to count it to know it was more than 75,000, a lot more. And beneath the money, a single photo. Mark and Lisa, laughing on a boat, his arm around her waist. On the back, in Lisa's handwriting, "Our secret." Rage surged through her, hot and blinding. She shoved the photo into her pocket and hefted the bag, her mind spinning. This was enough to pay Viper, but what was it really for? And why Lisa? Her phone buzzed as she stepped outside. A text from an unknown number. "Bring the money to the old mill. 8 p.m. Come alone, or Sophie pays." Viper. She glanced at the time, 2 p.m. 6 hours to decide. But before she could process it, a shadow fell across her path. She looked up, and there was Lisa, standing by her car, arms crossed, eyes red-rimmed. "Emily," Lisa said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." "How did you find me?" Emily snapped, clutching the bag tighter. "I followed you. I knew you'd dig into Mark's mess eventually." Lisa took a step closer, her gaze flicking to the duffel. "What's in there?" "None of your business," Emily shot back. "Not after what you've done." Lisa's face crumpled. "I didn't mean for any of this. Mark dragged me into it. The money, the lies I wanted to tell you." "Save it." Emily cut her off, shoving past. "I saw the photo. Our secret. You and him." "It's not what you think." Lisa grabbed her arm, desperate. "That was years ago, before you were married. He swore it was over, but then he came to me last month, said he needed help, that he was in deep with some guy named Viper." Emily froze, Viper's name a jolt to her system. "You knew about Viper?" Lisa nodded, tears streaking her face. "Mark borrowed from me to pay him, but it wasn't enough. He said he had to plan a big score." "That bag? Is that it?" Emily's grip tightened on the duffel. "Maybe. But I don't trust you, Lisa. Not anymore." "I'm trying to fix this," Lisa pleaded. "Let me help you. We can take it to Viper together." "No," Emily said, yanking her arm free. "You've helped enough." She stormed to her car, slamming the door as Lisa called after her. The engine roared to life, but as she pulled onto River Road, headlights flared in her rearview mirror, a black SUV, tailing her, too close to be coincidence. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. "You weren't alone. Bad move." Panic clawed at her chest. She floored the gas, the SUV gaining as the road twisted toward the hills. Ahead, the old mill loomed dark, abandoned Viper's meeting spot. But she wasn't there yet, and the SUV was closing in fast. Then she saw a glint of metal in the driver's hand. A gun aimed her way. The road twisted like a snake through Millbrook's outskirts, the black SUV's headlights searing into Emily's rearview mirror. Her knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. the duffel bag sliding across the passenger seat as she took a sharp curve. The old mill was a mile ahead, its skeletal frame barely visible against the darkening sky, but the gun in her pursuer's hand made every second a gamble. She couldn't outrun them, not in her beat-up sedan, but she had to try. The engine whined as she pushed it harder, the speedometer trembling past 60. The SUV surged closer, its growl drowning out the thud of her pulse. A crack split the air a gunshot, and her back windshield shattered, glass raining onto the back seat. Emily yelped, ducking low, her car swerving as panic clawed at her throat. Think, she muttered, scanning the road. A narrow dirt path branched off to the right, barely a trail, overgrown with weeds. It led into the woods risky, but her only shot at losing them. She yanked the wheel, tires skidding as she veered onto the path. Branches scraped the car, a cacophony of snaps and screeches, but the SUV hesitated, its bulk too wide for the turn. For a moment, she thought she'd made it. The headlights faded, swallowed by the trees. She slowed, her breaths ragged, and pulled the car behind a thicket of pines. The duffel sat heavy beside her cash, secrets, and a lifeline she couldn't lose. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking as she dialed 911, but the signal bars mocked her. None. A twig snapped outside, her head whipped up, eyes darting through the shadows. Footsteps crunched closer, deliberate and slow. She clutched the key in her pocket, her only weapon, and held her breath. The driver's side door yanked open, and a figure loomed tall, leather-clad, scar over the eyebrow. Viper. His gun gleamed in the dim light, aimed at her chest. Out, he barked. Now. Emily slid from the car, legs unsteady, the duffel still in her grip. I was bringing it to you, she said, voice tight. The money, it's all here. Viper's lip curled. You think I care about your good intentions? You brought your sister, I said alone. She followed me, Emily snapped, anger flaring past her fear. I didn't tell her to come. Doesn't matter. He stepped closer, the gun steady. Hand it over. She hesitated, then thrust the bag at him. He unzipped it, rifling through the stacks, but his eyes narrowed. This is more than 50, way more. It's what I found, she said, forcing calm. Take it. We're done. He chuckled, a low, chilling sound. Done? Sweetheart, you don't get it. This ain't just about Mark's debt anymore. He tapped the gun against his palm. Someone paid me to clean up this mess. All of it. Starting with him and now you. Her stomach dropped. Paid you? Who? Doesn't matter. You're a loose end. He raised the gun, finger on the trigger. A shout cut through the night. Drop it! And headlights blazed from the trail. Viper spun, cursing, as a car screeched to a stop. Lisa leapt out, a tire iron in her hands, her face a mask of fury. Leave her alone, Lisa swung, catching Viper's arm. The gun fired wild, the bullet burying itself in a tree as he stumbled. Emily lunged, slamming the car door into his side. He roared, dropping the weapon, and Lisa kicked it into the brush. Run! Lisa yelled, grabbing Emily's arm. They bolted for Lisa's car, Viper's snarls echoing behind them. Emily clutched the duffel somehow still, in her grasp as they piled in, Lisa flooring the gas. The SUV's headlights flared again in the distance, but they were already tearing back toward town. Panting, Emily glared at her sister. What the hell, Lisa? You almost got us killed. I saved you, Lisa shot back, her knuckles white on the wheel. He was going to shoot you. You shouldn't have been there, he said alone. I know what he said, Lisa's voice broke, but I couldn't let you face him by yourself, not after everything. Emily's anger faltered, tangled with exhaustion and the sting of Lisa's earlier betrayal. Who's paying him, Lisa? You know more than you're telling me. Lisa's jaw tightened, her eyes fixed on the road. I don't know. Mark hinted at someone big, but he wouldn't say who. Said it was safer that way. Safer? Emily laughed bitterly. Look where that got us. They drove in silence, the mill fading into the night. Back at the house, Emily barricaded the door, Sophie still safe at her friend's. Lisa paced, tire irons still in hand, as Emily dumped the duffel on the table. The cash spilled out, a fortune stained with lies. We can't keep this, Lisa said, staring at it. Whoever's behind Viper, they'll come for it. Then we use it, Emily replied, her voice hardening. To find out who's pulling the strings. Mark's awake by now. He's got answers. Lisa nodded, hesitant but resolute. Okay, but we're in this together, Em. No more secrets. Emily met her gaze, the rift between them still raw. No more secrets. A knock rattled the door, sharp and insistent. They froze, exchanging a look. Emily crept to the window, peering through the blinds. A man stood on the porch, not Viper, but someone in a crisp suit, his face shadowed by a fedora. He held an envelope, tapping it against his thigh. "Mrs. Carter," he called, his voice smooth as silk. "I represent someone who'd like to make you an offer. Open the door. You'll want to hear this."